A lot continues to come out around Jeffrey Epstein and any ties to people with a convicted pedophile. His relationships, unwinding what is significant or what is just random is the process that you and I feel like the rest of the world is kind of dealing with today. Tell us a little bit about the process before we get into some of the news events of the day.
Well, so the Republican majority of the Oversight Committee has been sending subpoenas to all kinds of people who might be tangentially related or directly connected to Jeffrey Epstein and his sort of web of finances that help fuel his sex trafficking operation. People who have already appeared before the committee or have sent in sworn statements include former Attorney General Bill Barr, James Comey, and last week we had Les Wexner up in Ohio getting grilled by Democratic staffers of the committee. So this time it's the Clintons. They had been putting off or trying to. They wanted to have a public deposition or a public hearing because they said they had nothing to hide, and because the committee basically said, we will hold you in contempt if you refuse. And they suspected that the Democrats in the House would have actually agreed to pass a vote of contempt. So the Clintons eventually yielded, and here we are. It's not the first time a former president has been called to answer to a subpoena post-office, but it is very, very rare.
Do we have any information at this point about what and the former president is scheduled for tomorrow, but do we have any information about what the Clintons have said or plan to say thus far?
Well, Hillary Clinton released a statement this morning. She was very defiant about sort of the need to have her come out and do all of this. She basically had said that she'd sent a sworn statement in January that she had never met Jeffrey Epstein. So there was really no reason for her to be talking. She said this was just basically a sideshow to distract from President Donald Trump. So it's very interesting because the Republicans for the committee have said that they expect today to be a very, very long day and that tomorrow will be even longer. So what they're going to do regarding their questioning of Hillary Clinton is going to be really interesting. There are obviously some very rare connections of her with Ghislaine Maxwell, the sort of the former girlfriend, companion of Jeffrey Epstein, who's serving her own jail sentence at the moment. She, in fact, attended Chelsea Clinton's wedding as the guest of a friend of the former president. So that's at least one instance where they've crossed paths, and Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had some workings and participation in the Clinton charities. So that will also come up as well. But she's very her statement was very defiant. She said, "We have tried repeatedly to answer your questions. You really want a sideshow. You want a political circus," and they're basically seeing it through a partisan lens, and that's really how they're treating it.
Jamie, one thing we want to ask, and this was a story of yours, I think you had one earlier in the week and then kind of an update today, that House Democrats are demanding that President Trump testify to congressional investigators on ties to Jeffrey Epstein. We should point out that both President Trump and the Clintons have denied any knowledge of Epstein's criminal activities. As for President Trump, his name comes up a lot. I don't think, we all know in the Epstein files. There's also been a lot of attention to some reporting by NPR too this past week when it comes to President Trump. Tell us more about why Democrats want President Trump to testify.
Well, as you said, and this is something that the ranking Democrat, Robert Garcia, said today. He said the only person whose name, or maybe not the only person, but one person whose name comes up more often than President Bill Clinton is President Trump's. And so he would like to see President Trump now also appear before the committee if President Clinton can do so as well. They also said that they believe that they saw 50 files or records related to this case involving a woman who was a minor when she alleges that the president abused her in some way. We don't have details of that. The Democrats have said that the archive manifest shows that the DOJ took those files out and haven't returned them. And the DOJ is basically saying those are documents that were taken away and will be returned, but this is literally a very partisan fight at the moment over the existence of these documents and whether they will actually be returned, whether they'll be released to the public or not.
But there are missing files.
There are missing files according to the reporting and according to what the Democrats are saying. The DOJ says that the files are not missing. They have been removed for particular reasons. So, this is such a political story in so many ways. What was very interesting was that when reporters asked the Republican chair today whether President Trump ought to be brought for questioning as well, he didn't close the door on that possibility. And one thing that I thought was really interesting is that he himself, Jim Comer, the chairman of the committee, said that there was a possibility that the name of Howard Lutnick, the current Commerce Secretary, would come up today. And Representative Nancy Mace, who's a Republican, said that she was expecting to ask questions regarding Howard Lutnick as well. So it's just really curious what's happening today. And we're watching the same as everyone else to see what develops.
I'm glad you mentioned this as a political story, Jamie, because I'm wondering about repercussions or consequences for people who, what is the end game here for people who say, okay, we need to understand what's in the Epstein files? Because at least here in the United States, apart from Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein himself, there haven't been any arrests in the U.S. It's not the case for outside of the U.S. And certainly some people have lost their jobs and some people have or are stepping down from positions because of their association with Jeffrey Epstein. But what is the end game here?
I mean, that's a really great question. We have seen, as you said, arrests overseas, and here we've seen people resign their post, very prestigious post, and step away or, sort of relinquish the spotlight in a way. The problem with all of this is it becomes this whole, the accusations of a cover-up that really start to take steam because if these files haven't been released en masse, unredacted, then why is that? And you had elements within the Trump administration who, prior to coming into government, were very forceful about having those files released and to have that kind of transparency and scrutiny. And now they're really kind of pulling it back. You remember that FBI Director Kash Patel testified in front of a congressional committee saying that he didn't see any evidence of anyone else being involved in the Epstein trafficking operation. And so now there's discussions about bringing him back to sort of speak to those statements. Because the release of the documents has been so fragmented, because some names of people who are not victims and minors have been redacted because of the lack of transparency for people who, if you're looking for a conspiracy, you're going to find one. And I don't know if anyone will ever actually be truly satisfied.
Right.
But what it has done is it's really caused a division amongst President Trump's supporters, particularly on the MAGA side, who have been sort of convinced of a deep state conspiracy here. And it's very unclear if they will be ever happy with whatever ends up coming out.